welcome to everybody. I'm glad you're here, and look forward to spending time with you either today or throughout the weekend. So, all right. With that, I'm just going to give you a brief history on the company. Obviously, those of you who've been around a long time should be able to come up here and tell this story, but for those that are new, just a quick rundown. The company was founded, or the roots of the company was actually founded back as far as 1939. There was a company here in town in Atlanta called the Calhoun Company. They were in the high-tech area of overhead projectors back then. That was state-of-the-art, and that's kind of the segue into what we've done. So they were around for whatever period of time, and a company called Technical Industries grew out of that organization. Tech Industries was a company that did audiovisual work like these gentlemen, post-production facilities, news trucks, TV stations, that sort of thing. I worked in the broadcast industry. TI was one of my dealers. Ellie and I worked together, and Tom, at a company called Fortel, which went through a shutdown in 1988. So Ellie was smart enough to get out before me. But she went to work for TI, and then after we got the company closed down, I went to work with TI several months later. I joined them. She was working with the company, but I went to work for the sister company, one of the sister companies called Tech Systems. Tech Systems was put in place to sell security product in the late 80s for whatever that was then, tube cameras, and to just have an enhancement for their existing client base. So kind of a new offering, the thing you should do if you're going to grow your business, right? So Tech Systems was in place, very small. I think I was the 4th or 5th employee. Dave Hawley joined us soon thereafter. Dave's been around as long as I have. But we were, again, doing that traditional security stuff, but we also got involved in a thing called DocuCam. Or let me say it this way. We responded to a bid for in-car camcorders for police cars. That had been tested by the Georgia State Patrol. They had some success, and so they put a bid out for, I think it was 800 units at the time, for basically a camcorder and a wireless mic from Radio Shack, very, very consumer-based concept. We went in and said, hey, we've got a better idea. We're going to put the camera by the rearview mirror, the recorder in the trunk, have it come on automatically with the blue lights and that sort of thing. And they said, that sounds great, show it to us. We said, well, it's just concept. They said, well, we'll give you a week. So they gave us a week, we built the prototype, and got that state contract. So when that happened, I joined them about that time as the general manager of Tech Systems to kind of drive the in-car camera program. It was in its infancy. There was a lot of issues with it. Tom Neeler could sit at the bar with you all day and talk about the time he spent in trunks of patrol cars or under dashes. But yeah. But yeah, you could actually get in the trunk. We might need a chainsaw to get him in the trunk now, but anyway, so we began that process, and as we continued to develop it, we began to have a lot of success at other levels. The State Patrol was showing it to the local municipality police, the state sheriffs, the county sheriffs, and so it began to grow, and it was really cops selling to cops, and there wasn't a better market, because if they told you they were going to buy something on Tuesday, they bought it on Tuesday, and they would pay you on Wednesday. So great market to be in. And it really began to take off. We had put about 2,000 systems in the country, we had some in Guam and Faroe Islands, and so we were dealing with trying to sell these things by day, install them by night, and we went to myself and another gentleman went to the owners of TI and said, we need to take this thing national. We got a real opportunity here, and they didn't want to do that because they said, we agree with you, but if it doesn't work out, then we put all the companies at risk with the money we'd have to put in it. So kind of got shot down, but then they followed up with, why don't you buy it? Well, I hadn't even thought about that concept. So myself and the other gentleman brought in 2 other guys who had money, and we bought Tech Systems from TI in 1990, I believe, early 1990. And so we broke off. So even though we're founded in 87, we've been under different ownership since 1990 than the original owners. We continued to grow DocuCam. It got to a point where we couldn't keep up with it ourselves, and so we entered a marketing arrangement with a company called MPD out of Owensboro, Kentucky, who did marketing for it, and they said, if it works out, we'll buy the organization or buy this part of your company. And that happened on Valentine's Day, 1992. That was the best gift I could have got because it was killing me. But so we sold off DocuCam in 92, And all along, we were continuing to do our traditional security offerings, and growing it a little bit, but excuse me, not much. So we turned our focus towards that after selling it. Now, the good news is I negotiated Tom into that sale. So he went to Kentucky and came back with the lovely lady sitting next to him, Ann Neeler. So it was a double win for Tom. We still have to talk about it. So, yeah, he hadn't been nearly as friendly since they came back. But so anyway, some good came out of that other than the sell itself. We began to grow our traditional business. About the same time that we sold that, we got into a state contract for correctional facilities to de-man the towers and put technology on about a mile of fence. And we were talking about it at breakfast some. It was rewarding and the biggest nightmare ever. But we did 29 prisons over, where's Steve Allen? Probably 10 or 12 years. It took us to get them all in. Rodney was around for some of that, some of the others here as well, Dave Holly. Dave and I used to climb fences, if you could believe that, to test the system. So that's how long ago this goes. Could you do it today, Dave? Yeah, you could? So,
once.
If I had to, once, right. So anyway, we wrapped that up, but we began to continue growing the business, and we had gotten to a place where we had an event in our timeline there that kind of changed this company forever. And I'm going to let Jerry speak directly to it, but it was in 1995. We had the situation occur, which has changed who we are, how we go to market, and the fact that you're all here today. Because if it had not happened, I can assure you this room would be quite smaller. So, with that.
Okay. Most of you know me. For those who don't, I'm Jerry Clark, and he was talking about Valentine Day in 1992. That's when I joined the company. I'd actually been involved with the company prior to that time as a commercial banker, actually up in Gainesville, Georgia. And I'd been banking some of the TI people and actually set up a line of credit for this new venture of putting cameras in cars. So I was exposed to the company, and by 92, my bank, a lot of banks were going through a lot of trouble in the early 90s and being acquired and all that. And my bank was about to be acquired, and I'd been in banking a number of years, but I said, okay, here's a time for me to cut and run. So I talked to Daryl and some of the other guys, and they said, yeah, we're probably going to need a finance guy, So on board I came. And one of the last things or the first things that I saw when I got here was Tom Neeler in a trunk of a car, and I'll never ever forget that.
Hard as I try, right?
Yeah. There's well, I won't go any further than that. What I saw, but you can imagine. But anyway, Tom was on his way up to Kentucky, and I was the new finance guy. Of course, it took about 15 minutes for me to figure out that to be a finance guy, you've actually got to have a company that's got some money, for you to have anything to do. So you had 15 minutes a week to work on the finances, so I needed to learn something else. And so over time, I did a little bit of everything as far as managing service or installs, or I did all kinds of stuff, completely without any knowledge whatsoever of the business. And it worked for me. So anyway, all that aside, as Daryl was talking about in '95, by that time, we had begun to grow the company, and we were well entrenched in the prisons, and we were doing a fair amount of business. We got a telephone call from one of our major clients one day, and this lady asked Daryl and I to come down and sit down and have a meeting with her. We assumed, naturally, being positive people and knowing how great we were, that she was calling us down to give us another big piece of business. So we went down, order pad in hand, ready to sign her up, only to find out that she called us down to fire us. What had happened, it was over a weekend, they had had their cameras go out, and it was all because of just a fuse, but during that time, we didn't respond to calls on weekends, or we counted the holidays too. We were like most companies at that time. We tried to respond in a matter of days hopefully not weeks, which is what a lot of the companies were doing during that time period. But anyway, it was not enough. And the lady explained to us how we had left them vulnerable by not responding. True, the contract said that we wouldn't come when they put in that particular call because it was a weekend, but that really just was not the right thing to do. And when she got through explaining all of this and helping us out the door to get in our cars and leave, it was very clear to us that we probably were not doing the right thing. And to back up a little bit, Steve Allen, I think, actually took that call, and Darrell had some exchange with him, and Darrell actually went down because it was in the area to see how things were, and they had already fixed it. But, you know, it was too late. By that time, they had experienced this whole, you know, we're not coming problem, and that caused us to be terminated. Well, it was eye-opening. We thought that we were, you know, as good as anybody else in the industry, and one of the phrases then that we were proud of using was that we suck less than all the other competition. But we still were in the mode where that we responded to calls in days. A guy would call in with a service call on Monday, and we would try to get him scheduled by Thursday or something like that. So as we worried with that and talked about it a great deal, it became obvious to us that we had to do something different. Coincidentally, in that time frame, I went out to Pelco to go to one of their sessions that they were presenting about how to run your business more successfully. And some of the things they taught us in that was that if you're going to compete with someone about something, don't just, as example, responding to a service call, if somebody else is going to do it in 2 days, don't just say you'll do it in 1 day. Do something that he absolutely would never be foolish enough to try. And they used their example of how they handled, if you sent a camera back to them, or a pan and tilt unit back to them during that period of time, they guaranteed you that the day they got it, they were going to turn it around and send it back. And that was just unbelievable. Nobody was doing anything like that. And they walked us around in this huge plant and even took us back to their service department and said, look at this huge service department that we have created in order to be able to respond like that. And we walked in, and it was just a small cube with one folding table, and it had one pan and tilt unit sitting on there, and there was nobody even in the room. This was their big, you know, service department. And what they explained to us is that when it comes in, the guy looks at it, and if he can't fix it in 10 minutes, we pack up a new unit and send it out. That's how we solve the problem. We'll fix that one later if it can be reused. So it was that out-of-the-box thinking. I mean, everybody thought that if I sell you a camera, or a pan and tilt unit rather, and it breaks, then that's yours, and it's your problem. I'll try to fix it under warranty for you, and we'll get it back out to you as soon as we can. Pelco said, no, that just doesn't work. And they introduced the concept to us, and you guys have heard this over and over, and it said that you can take your contract and your relationship with your customer, and you can do the thing right, follow the contract to the letter and respond and do whatever, or you can go outside the box and you can do the right thing. So we started trying to figure out, well, okay, what is the right thing? And at that time, our office was in Roswell, and a lot of the people, several of the people that are here today were employed with us at the time, and we began to wrestle with how could we set up a service agreement that would just blow everybody else out of the water, and we did that. But even then, it was this was our first pass at the thing. Basically, was that we were going to try to respond within 8 business hours, meaning that a call comes in at 2 on Monday, then we'd be there by 2 on Tuesday. We were still leaving out the weekends. It was still fairly uncomplicated. All of our service techs took a look at that and said, you know, I guess we're all about to get fired because no way any of us can do that, because we were scheduling calls then out 2-3 days. the amazing thing was that the first week that we tried to do it, our percentage of completion or success in doing it was in the high 70s. Blew me away. I thought if we got 30 or 40, then we'll work on it, we'll build, we'll get better, and we'll get better. But we turned it around, and the FOCUS acronym, as you all know, stands for our customers' ultimate satisfaction. We worked with a lot of different wording on that. I won't do that on video and camera, what some of the other words were, but Ellie's the one who actually came up with that word. So it's good for you to know who started that whole thing. But at that time, we began to develop that product. And if I can flip back for just a second and tell you, the customer who fired us was actually Georgia Power. And if I can flip forward for a second, sometime after getting this product really rolling and this philosophy really rolling, she came to one of our seminars, and it was mind-boggling in that almost immediately she committed again to us and did several $1 million worth of business after seeing what had changed in our company and what took place with the FOCUS. But FOCUS grew over time. As it started, it was just a service product, if you will, or actually not even a product. It was a way to respond to our clients in a philosophy a little bit there. But we began to understand that it was far more than that, and we began to build on that philosophy, and it became the way we eat, sleep, and drink. And that's what you'll hear all the time today, or any time, is about how we are committed to that FOCUS philosophy, and how also that you'll hear people talk about that it's actually ruined you as a customer. Once you've got that committed in your own head, and you go to get service somewhere and you don't find FOCUS, then all of a sudden you're a very irritable person. My wife says, "Don't you do that?" You know, yeah, don't you call them back and tell them what you think. But I'll go in another room and I'll call them back and tell them what I think. So anyway, that's kind of how the FOCUS product unfolded, and it was developed over time, and it's still developing. We're still finding more things that we build on FOCUS from a philosophical standpoint. And one of the real big things to me was when one of our employees that had been with us for probably 6 months that time, he was with us several different times, but I was doing an exit interview with him and saying, well, hey, you know, you've worked here 3 or 4 different times and now you're leaving again, you know, what is it? And he said, well, you know, he said, as long as you have a committed FOCUS philosophy to your clients, it is unreasonable for you to expect your employees to deliver on that unless you have a committed FOCUS philosophy to your employees too. So that was kind of stage 2, that we began to really develop and focus on who our employees were and what they do. Tour de Focus grew out of that. We wanted to know what you thought. We wanted to know what we could do to make life better for you here, and so that we had a real philosophical commitment both to our clients and to our internal clients. And that's what you are. But now you're owners. You're not internal clients. You're owners. So that's a brief overview of the FOCUS. The story's been told a number of times. I probably left out several things.
I was going to add a few things.
Yeah. So Daryl always has a really nice explanation or description of how all this worked. Most of it involves what he did.
No pressure, right? But he's 100% right. No, no. Just a couple things to point out. The call in question that came in that changed who we are was on Labor Day. So that has a little meaning with why we get together on this weekend. Steve and I were actually going to do something. I think we were going to some car races or something. So I called to just confirm where we were going to meet and all that, and asked if anything was going on. He said, well, Georgia Power's cameras are out, 43 cameras, I believe. in a parking deck, but I told them we'd be there Tuesday because that's, as Jerry pointed out, that's what the agreement said. I happened to be almost across the street from the place and said, well, I'll go by there and see if it's anything simple. And as he mentioned, it was a nickel fuse, a slow blow fuse. We used to build our own power supplies back then, and so we had a fuse on the primary side of that, and it blew, and we had spares in the can, and a security officer put a nickel fuse in and got those cameras back up and running. So that relationship with Georgia Power, we lost over a nickel, right? And when we sat down with her, she said, look, I love you guys, and that's why I'm having this conversation with you instead of just going away quietly, is that, you didn't bring into consideration what was at risk. And what was at risk was a lot of ladies working in a call center on a holiday weekend, cameras out in a parking deck, false sense of security, so the liability for the organization went through the roof, potential liability, and her personal credibility was at stake because she had aligned with the wrong company. If they couldn't have those cameras up and running. So that was, really what kind of drove this thing home. As Jerry pointed out, I think it was roughly 8 years later, we had obviously begun to practice focus, and we're having a lot of great success with it. And we did a presentation we had a symposium type of thing where we brought in clients and prospects, and she happened to show up. Dave Sherman did a focus presentation that day. I don't know if you remember that down at I'm trying to forget it myself, but because it was like watching mud dry. But anyway,
We were all hungover.
yeah. But she got something out of it, and so she came up to me afterwards and said, that's really great, that you guys have got this new thing in place. And I said, well, if you hadn't fired us, it probably wouldn't exist. And as Jerry pointed out, we went on to have I think within that was probably September, October timeframe. We had that. By November, they had already purchased $3 million worth of product from us, and we had a long, mutually beneficial relationship. But over time, the team at Georgia Power changed, and it was no longer about being mutually beneficial. It was about price, and everything was about price. And so we went back, Wayne and I went back one day, toughest day I ever had down there, and we actually fired them. And so it kind of brought it full circle, because if you're going to provide focus, it has to be mutually beneficial. You can't have it be one-sided. And we've had other situations across the country. I'm sure they'll tell you some examples here in the next session, but we actually have, for lack of a better term, fired clients because they were either abusing our people or trying to abuse focus in itself for personal gain. So it has to work for both sides, and when it does, it's all encompassing. And so it was ironic that over time we had to go back and do that, and they were just shocked that we had taken that approach. But you can't provide this level of resources. We've got the best people in the industry working for our team, and you can't provide that level of resources and do it for pennies on the dollar, and that's what they expected. And so the system we put into place across Georgia, lots and lots of facilities, it's in total disarray now, and it's because it's not being serviced properly. So I just wanted to add that. The other thing I want to add about Pelco, most of you probably know Pelco as a manufacturer. I'll give you a little history on Pelco. Pelco started out as a company that manufactured bat manure. That's where the term Pelco came from. Okay, they were in the bat manure business, for what that's worth. So somehow in that business, they began to bend sheet metal for something. And over time, they began to make camera enclosures and then electronics and that sort of thing. And they grew this business to be a huge business. They did not grow it based on the product. The product was always average. It was steady. It wasn't feature rich compared to a lot of things. It was just good and steady stuff. But the way they grew their business was on fanatical customer service. And Larry, you might know this number. I think it was about $200 million they sold the company for. So you start out in the manure business and you sell it for $200 million. I'd call that a successful day. But the ironic twist to that is that they sold it to a company called Schneider, which you've probably all seen on escalators and elevators, and they're kind of in the building automation world, a French-owned company. And in a very, very short period of time, they destroyed the Pelco culture for fanatical customer service. Within, easily to say, 2 years, they were off the radar. And by the time they figured out what they had done by being numbers-driven versus culture-driven, they had destroyed that part of their company. And now they're fighting, trying to come back. But you don't get many opportunities to burn people in any business, right? And so they're out there. They're not a player. They're still, at one time at trade shows they had a booth bigger than this room. If you go in there now, they've got one about, I don't know, 20% the size of this room. That's just all they have to offer. So the culture is the only thing that we have to sell. The widgets are getting to the point where you can go buy them at the drugstore, cameras, Amazon, wherever you want to go get this stuff. So it's how it's serviced and supported that matters the most. And so that's the business we're in, and we should all keep that in mind all the time. So bring it home, Dad.
Bring it home. All right. It's always amazing to me when I sit back and I think about what has gone on with this company, and where we are now. Of course, we are employee owned, and what a giant step that has been. But it's just the beginning, and so it's almost like you guys, as owners of the company, potential owners of the company, if you're new with us and you're not in yet, you will be in a year or so. But what's here now for you guys is what Daryl and I had in 1992. We had just the beginning of something, and that's where you guys are now, is with this whole ownership thing. Some people will leave before a lot of that is realized. We've got a few people that are like me; they're beginning to be a little long in the tooth, so to speak. But that doesn't matter, because we got a lot of young blood coming along. We got a lot of young people who are most deserving of the rewards that will be there, because that this is an employee-owned company. But I want to tell you that if you're still sort of shaking your head or scratching your head and really wondering, what is this actually going to mean to me? Don't feel bad about that. You're like most everybody else. This is something that will unfold over time. It is something that we really haven't quite figured out how that works with you as an individual yet. And our efforts to try to explain that to you are difficult at best. I read a lot of periodicals about from NCEO about ESOPs all over the world. And what I'm finding is that we've now come to the most difficult phase of the ESOP, and that is getting you to embrace ESOP and understand how it affects your day-to-day life or your day-to-day activity. How do you, I was talking to Tracy a little bit a minute ago, and what is it that you do that can have an impact on ESOP? And there's no deadline for you to do that. I'm not trying to put anything heavy on anybody right here. I'm just trying to tell you that if you're wrestling with it a little bit today, don't worry. This will take time. It'll take time for you to see it meaningful, but it'll also take time for you to come to understand fully what your role is in all of that. But it will come to you. That will click one day. But when it does click for you, what I ask you to do is turn to the guy next to you and say, aha, I got this thing figured out. And see if you can explain to the employee that's working with you, what it means to you. And that's how it's going to grow. We're going to continue to add people. We're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Those are things that are just going to happen. But the thing that we can't really look out and say, okay, in 3 years, you're going to fully embrace the employee ownership culture. We can't say that. We don't know that. No company knows that. It'll help you a little bit if you live where there's a public grocery store. Go in and talk to one of the employees there. That'll help you a little bit too, because they've been at it for a long time, and that's a bunch of really turned on people if you go into one of their grocery stores. So I just want to say that all of this road has come to this place where we're actually starting over again. We're starting over with something brand new, a much bigger outfit. We're going to grow it even more, but you're going to do that. And I'm just trying to get the point across that don't feel bad if it's not making a lot of sense yet. It will over time.
All right. Well, again, in Jerry's role, Jerry retired in '08. We had a really nice party for him. He came back soon thereafter because he got his honeydew list done at home, and Jan called and said, "You got to take him back." So he's.
I'm looking for another party.
He wants another party. He's not getting another party. He's had no matter how many times he retires, he's had his retirement party. But anyway, Jerry's back. He's running the ESOP, administering the ESOP for us. He says it's part-time. I say it's full-time for part-time pay. But if you have any questions related to the ESOP, he's the person you need to contact, and he will likely have the answer, but if he doesn't, he will get it for you. So again, use this resource. He's here for your behalf. He represents the ownership of the company, which is you. So any questions regarding ESOP or anything we've talked about before? We're ahead of schedule, Christine.